Hello, welcome back. It is I, Anthony Mueller, the wine advocate reviewer for Washington State and South Africa. Today, I have a very, very talented winemaker, a legend of South Africa, Mr. Chenin Blanc himself, will be joining us momentarily. Let's see if we can bring him into the room, which I see he is here. Hope everyone's Wednesday. Woke up this morning and it smelled like a very smoky smokehouse. It's back again. This year's challenging, I'll tell you what. Hello, sir. How are you, Ken?
How are you doing, Anthony? How's it going, man?
Oh, could always be worse. I don't want to complain. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I know that you're a very busy person and you've got a lot of things going on. Very, very thankful that you're here, and hope you're doing well. First off, for those around the planet who don't know who you are and don't know the legacy of Mr. Chenin Blanc, can you please introduce yourself and give a little background on your brand?
Well, thanks, Anthony. Ken Forrester is the name, and the name of the brand, I guess it was just a lack of imagination. I was young at the time. I couldn't think of a clever, smarter name. I hadn't been to jail yet, and I figured it should be a good idea to use the name. I knew a lot of people from my background in hotels and restaurants, and I thought if I got into buying a vineyard and started making some wine that could set me in good stead, that we had a lot of friends, and that's literally how we started out. It was a family business right from the very get-go. When I say that, mother-in-law, wife, daughters labeling bottles way after dark. I mean, this is kind of tantamount to slave labor, I guess. I mean, I could have been in a lot of trouble today for doing what we did in those days. But sure. we were labeling bottles late at night. We were getting orders ready and packaging them, trying to get them out by the next day. And it all started off with just a whim and a dream. Mr. Mandela was out of jail. South Africa was going into the very first democratic elections in 1994, and we bought the vineyard in November 1993. It looked like the property market was at its worst possible, and I saw this as a great opportunity to buy the biggest piece of land that I simply couldn't afford. I mean, I bought 50 hectares, 126 acres of prime Stellenbosch vineyard at a time when nobody would touch any land, and we managed that. It's the only opportunity we had. In every adversity, there's always great opportunity. And I think it's really important if you look at where we are today, if you look at what's happening with COVID, and really it's desperate and it's bad, and I get that. But I think there are opportunities to be had in adversity. And I think that there'll be people who'll find great opportunities, even in today's trying and difficult times. And it was similar. We were in some difficult times. We setting out a business based on Chenin Blanc. And Chenin Blanc was unheard of. I mean, in those days, Chenin Blanc came in a kind of 1 liter flagon called Paul Masson Chablis from California. And that was kind of where Chenin Blanc was headed. That's what it was doing. And we started barrel fermenting Chenin Blanc. My colleagues and my neighbors, people around me were saying, you don't come from here. I go, did you get a return ticket? Because you might have to use the other half of that. I mean, you shouldn't be barrel fermenting Chenin Blanc. That might not be a good idea. And I worked in France. I went and worked at Bernard Germain at Chateau Fel in the Loire, in Toissay. Beautiful, beautiful Chateau de Fel. And worked with Bernard Germain, who was way ahead of his time. The guy was way ahead of his time. And he was barrel fermenting wild yeast, 400-liter French oak barrels, neutral or slightly toasted, way back then. And I'm talking in 1994, 95, 96. That's when we spent some time there. Where before people were even looking at what Chenin Blanc was capable of. And so it was an interesting time. It was a great challenge. And when I looked at the weather and I looked at what we were doing here, and I tried to lay out the kind of what kind of weather patterns do we have, eventually it dawned on me that where we're situated with the Cape South coast and the Atlantic Ocean, just literally 4 miles from us, as the crow flies, we have a typical Mediterranean climate. So here we are, Chenin Blanc, but a Mediterranean climate. So what makes Chenin Blanc work? I believe that what makes Chenin Blanc work, and I should have patented this. I wish I had $1 for every time I've heard somebody else tell me. It's called cool sunshine. And it's the best oxymoron you can imagine. I mean, cool sunshine. Why would that be possible? But that's what makes Chenin Blanc work. It loves that cool sunshine. And in the Loire Valley, they guaranteed the cool. They beg for sunshine. Where we are, we guarantee the sunshine. We beg for the cool. And if you're oceanic or you have elevation, you're going to get some of that cool. So either that or you've got a really cool walk. I'm not sure. I mean, you've got to have something that's going to contribute to how you're going to be cool. But Chenin Blanc needs that cool, I believe, to get the fruit aspect of it, to bring out the real purity and to drive that kind of white apple, white pear, kind of real white fruit aspect that is pure Chenin Blanc at its best. But interesting, I snagged on the fact that we had a Mediterranean climate. A Mediterranean climate. You go, well, so what does that mean? And if you go look at the Rhone Valley and the southern Rhone, and you look at Grenache and some Syrah, and as you slightly move further north up towards the continental climate area, you get into some Mourvèdre. And I was like, well, this is really interesting. And Grenache was hardly planted. There was very little Grenache available in South Africa. And I looked around, and at one stage when I started looking for Grenache, there was a total of 64 hectares of old vine Grenache, 30, 40 years old. That was it, total in, let me get this right, in 110,000 hectares of vineyard, there was 64 hectares of Grenache. That was all. Yeah. And I latched onto this Grenache, started working with Grenache from 1995, 96, and with Grenache started looking at what was possible with our Mediterranean climate, with our cool, wet winter, our long, dry summer, and what could we do with Grenache that would be sexy? And hence we set out in that direction. So the reds were kind of Grenache-based, Mediterranean Rhone-based, and the whites looking at Chenin Blanc. And we had old Chenin planted in the vineyard. We had old Syrah planted in the vineyard. We had some Cinsault, which I sadly, yes, I pulled it out.
It happens.
Yeah, we make some bad decisions every now and then, but it was very virused, and it really needed to come out at some point. But I mean, I wish I had that Cinsault today, because it seems like there's a huge resurgence even for Cinsault.
For sure.
And those lighter kind of red. And when you think of Grenache, when you talk to wine lovers and you talk to old Burgundians, they talk about Grenache with a slight sort of respect. They talk about Grenache being the Pinot de la Sud. And they'll tell you there's stories of Grenache leaving the south of France in a tanker overnight and arriving back empty the next day, where it discharges all that Grenache at 14% alcohol, where Pinot Noir might only be 12% alcohol. Who knows? But, the stories are legend. And Grenache, I think, might have helped to make some great vintages of Burgundy over the years. And that sort of stuff. If you talk to the old guys, they say this is how it happened.
That's a legend.
Pinot de la Sud, Grenache.
Yeah, awesome, cool. Well, thank you for that, Ken. First off, how are you? 2020 has not been necessarily kind to the planets, and South Africa has had it particularly hard with the self-imposed prohibition and for a short time a kind of a complete ban and stop and halt on exports of alcohol. How are you doing in 2020 so far?
Andy, who could imagine, just when things were getting tough, our government decided they should make it as tough as possible. Like, if you're going to win the championships, let's win the Alpe d'Huez. If you're going to go for a climb, let's climb the toughest mountain in the world. So I guess we just got this world kind of challenge thing. And it's been extremely difficult. There's no doubt about it. Being shut down, not being able to export, not being able to sell wine at all has really had its challenges. And, it's been a long, dry summer, should I say. We were blessed. We've had 4 years of drought. And after the drought vintages, we've just kind of broken drought with the 2020 vintage, where 19 kind of just began to come out of drought. And 20, definitely, we feel like there's a reprieve. We're definitely out of the drought zone. And here we got this magic wine, this beautiful wine that we need to get into marketplace. We really want to get into marketplace. So we're working on that. Things are getting back to normal. As you know, there are all sorts of challenges, all sorts of strains in hospitality, airlines, duty-free, all of the markets which are just shut down still. So it's going to be a long time coming before we get this right, and we'll persevere. The good news is the juice is in the bottle, the wine's in the bottle, mostly. And, wine does have a sell-by date, but hopefully you and I will be able to drink that wine for the next 10 years anyway. So that sell-by date, we can relax. We'll get to it eventually.
Awesome. Yeah, 2020 has been definitely, I've come to say that it's the year of the pivot. You've got to be smart and you've got to be aware of what's going on. And there's a way to make things happen. So if you're aware of what's going on, you have opportunities, and that's what you see. I recently saw Qantas Air in Australia actually had a flight. It left from Sydney and it landed at Sydney. It flew around for 2 hours. It flew over the Great Barrier Reef and came back. And that flight sold out within like 15 minutes. Everyone just wanted to take a flight and just get out and get back to some kind of normalcy and see what's going on. And it's crazy. You think like it's a flight to nowhere. Why would you ever do that? But that's the thing is, there's always a way to look at the big picture and have a positive outlook on it. And it's all about seeing the opportunity within the challenges.
But given the challenges, Anthony, I tell you, there have been some extraordinary acts of terrific goodwill going on in the South African wine industry, where we fully realize that the hospitality industry are our partners, restaurants, hotels, etc. And a number of wineries working together, putting together mixed cases, for example, where each winery contributes 1,000 bottles, put together 1,000 cases of 6-packs, and we sell a voucher up front to go to a restaurant from a list of restaurants, which we believe are really good restaurants and people who supported us in the past. Yeah. So you're paying up front to get a restaurant voucher. The restaurant gets the cash immediately. You get to the restaurant. When you get to the restaurant, you redeem the value of your voucher and you get a free case of wine to take home with you. And the wine industry has been contributing to the restaurant industry to ensure that we get back started again, to make sure that we're all back in this together. For sure. And I think that there have been some wonderful initiatives out of the wine industry in South Africa. Now, you talk about what happens in adversity, people dig deep, people dig deep and they go hard. Yeah. And I think it's, it's just, these are our partners. We've got to ensure that they come back with us.
For sure. Yeah, I think building alliances and collaborations now, moving forward together, arm in arm, hand in hand, I think together is how we get through this. So it's a very smart thing. I see a lot of that happening here in the States. I haven't seen what you're talking about, like picking up a case of wine at the restaurant. That's pretty smart. You get a meal and you get a case of wine. That's very forward thinking. I like that. So
it's an act of charity because the winery gets no payment for the wine. Yeah. But it's good PR. People are going home with your wine. It's good for the restaurant. People are getting a great deal when they go out for their dinner. So it's good for everybody. And, awesome. We really believe that paying it forward in that way is probably going to try have a bigger impact on rescuing our hospitality industry.
It's very smart. Very smart. So let's rewind. How did you get into wine in the first place? I know that you had a very successful career with restaurants and hotels, hospitality. What initially drew you to the wine business?
You've got to be young and stupid sometime. And I rode a bicycle 2,500 kilometers. That's about 1,600 miles. Yeah. I rode a bicycle. It took us, a group of us, about 20 days to do 1,600 miles. And we rode from Johannesburg down to Cape Town, the long way round, right down the coastline. Yeah. And when we got to Cape Town, we'd finished up with the time that we'd had allotted, which was our vacation time. But we were in Cape Town, man, and we were students, and we had the wine, and we landed in heaven. This place was full of bottles of wine, and we were kind of like, we've got to check it out. So we just took an extra week vacation. It nearly got us kicked right out of college, and it was a real bad thing at the time. It was, but it embedded in me a love and appreciation of wine, which I was never going to lose. And then coming out of hotel school, going into hotels, working in hotels, having my own restaurants, what we did in the restaurant was every restaurant I had its very own walk-in wine cellar, so that I could take you by the hand from the table. I could lead you into the wine cellar and create a romance for you with a bottle of wine, a dusty bottle on a shelf, and you would come out with your eyes kind of gleaming, and you had a great bottle of wine in your hands, and you were going to have a great night out, not just every night out. And it was that ability to be able to walk people through the wine cellar, take them and show them what we had, that really drove me with my passion for wine. And to come down to the wineries to find out who had those wines, because distribution 40 years back wasn't just a phone call away. Everybody was separate. Everybody shipped their own wine. Nobody shipped their wine through a common distributor. Hell, imagine that. I'm shipping my wine with you. You might steal my customer. Nobody would do that kind of stuff those days.
Yeah.
So it was all that passion. And then the opportunity arose in that adversity when the whole South African market crashed with the general elections, with democracy, and we decided we would come to the Cape. We would buy a vineyard planted initially in 1694.
Awesome.
350 years ago. And the same Dutch that planted these vineyards, that brought these vines to South Africa, the Dutch East India Company, were responsible for that little island kind of on the east coast of New York called New Amsterdam, which today is New York.
New York. Yeah.
And they traded that island for some rum island where they could get molasses to make rum. Bad trade, I guess, that they did. Sure. We're really sorry about that one. Yeah. But they left behind them in New York the stain of Dutch law, which we share here in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And it's quite remarkable that all those 350 years ago, and the Dutch traders that came from South Africa traveled up the coast of Africa all the way past, and they'd look at Bordeaux, they'd look at that river at the Gironde, and they'd say, we just want to get our ships into the Gironde, but it was too shallow and it was just all mud. They couldn't get their boats in. They had to go all the way through into through the English Channel up to Holland, and then load back onto small boats, bring the small boats back down to Bordeaux, like 3 months delay in trading. You know what it is to wait 3 months to sell something to a customer. Can you imagine the kind of loss of turnover? Eventually, the Dutch, who knew about water and all these things, dredged the Gironde for the French. The French work a 4-day week, I believe, where they were never going to get that done. So you know what? The Dutch got in there, they dredged the Gironde. And when they dredged the Gironde, the left bank, which was a marshland, was finally available to be able to be planted because it drained, because the river was now deep enough to drain it. And they planted vines on that left bank of Bordeaux, way after South Africa was making wine, and they call us New World.
That's how it works. Everywhere outside of Europe is New World.
Yeah. And we were making wine before them.
Yeah. But I think if you look at France as a country, going back to Burgundy, clearly they got you beat there.
True. Okay. Picky. I get you. Yeah.
Apples, tomatoes. Yeah. Awesome. So you've clearly made a name for yourself with Chenin Blanc, and Chenin Blanc from South Africa has a specific malleability, much like Chardonnay has, where Chardonnay can be made in a wide style of a wide range of styles. When you think about the main factors for making Chenin Blanc and pulling out its natural expression and profile, what do you think that you've learned over the last 30 years or so is the main defining factor in pulling out those specific nuances and factors to really coax out the natural expression of Chenin Blanc?
It's a tough call, but making Chenin Blanc is a little bit like, in fact, a lot like calling cats. I'm a dog lover. Forgive me. I am. We have 6 dogs at the moment. We've always had a number of dogs. We have rescue pooches. And I just love dogs. I mean, you call a dog, it's like, yeah, he's right.
Right.
It's like, yeah, wait. You call a cat, he's like, you speaking to me, dude? And cats just might eventually come rubbing up against your leg on Wednesday if you called it on Monday. Now, making Chenin Blanc is like calling cats. You're doing what you do in the dark. You think you're doing the right thing. You're doing it in the best way you possibly can, and you wait for it to come and show itself to you. It's an incredibly masked grape. When you're tasting the fruit in the vineyard before harvest, I'm looking for the flavors I don't want. I don't know what the flavors are that I do want. It's a kind of, you don't want any soapiness, you don't want any lanolin, you don't want any bitterness. But anytime you lose all of those things, time to pick. Because if you've got all of that out, you're going to get the right stuff. And Chenin will show itself when it's good and ready to show itself. You can't force it. You can't play its hand for it. It's got great natural acidity. Respect that acid and never waste it. Never wait for Chenin to get too ripe where you get beyond the acid. You start losing that acidity because you lose the balance of the fruit immediately. Chenin needs that acid as a spine to be able to hold itself up. If you imagine without a spine, you'd have nowhere to put your shoulders. Chenin needs that spine to hang its shoulders on. And you really need to kind of be able to let that happen unknowingly, unwittingly, and wait for it to show you. It will.
Awesome. Yeah, it's one of the great things about Chenin is that it does have natural, elevated acidity that gives the wine longevity and energy, makes it very food friendly. But it also does have a kiss of phenolic bitterness, which I find pleasing. As you said, you can let it go a touch longer. I mean, look at wines like Corks from the Loire, where it's gone extendedly long, and it's really, really sweet, but it still has really, really high acidity, so it still is lively. But yeah, there's a lot of trying. It's funny. I had a conversation with a wine friend of mine the other day about Chardonnay and how Chardonnay is like this global, juggernaut. It's everywhere. It's made in all these different styles. It's unoaked. It's oaked. It's made in generous styles. It's made in lean styles that are acid driven and mineral driven. Chenin Blanc has that ability, and it takes on all these different expressions. But I think it's because of its acidity that it can actually stand up to a lot of different profiles and be pleasing in all the different categories. So
yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's certainly that acidity. I think that acidity. I mean, and that acidity is key to every style of Chenin Blanc you want to make. Whether you want to produce something unoaked, fresh, bright, mineral, crisp, whether you want to go big and bold, whether you want to barrel ferment, whether you want to go to sweet wine to kind of noble late harvest, but try to infuse Chenin Blanc. Acid is going to be key to every single one of those styles. That's why I say with Chenin Blanc, you really need to respect the acidity of the grape and understand that acid, if you were to cut an audio cable through, when you look at that audio cable in profile, you've got this copper core in the center. That's where you want the acidity of your Chenin Blanc to be, surrounded by the fruit, which is this insulation all the way around it. And if you've got to get that fruit right inside that acid core in the wine with the fruit wrapped around it. And that in my mind is the kind of key to juicy Chenin, to delicious Chenin.
Yeah, I like that analogy. I think for all the people out there who enjoy Chardonnay, it might be looking for something else. I think South African Chenin is a no-brainer to pivot and just be interested and just start trying some, because I think it checks all the boxes that that a Chardonnay lover would find enjoyable. All this wine. Let's talk about wine. I'm getting thirsty myself, so I think we should get some wine, shall we?
Sure. Should we kind of bend our palates and head into some red wine first?
I like that.
And start off with get some tannins and some richness and some power. And
Sure.
I'm gonna see if we can read. I don't know how this works, but If you
Oh,
can read
right.
that,
Yeah, that's not so much. There you
there
go.
you go.
There it is. That's gonna be the post picture for the poster for this for this chat.
We've done
Awesome.
the double negative. There you go. What can I
Right.
tell you? I had to try and figure it out.
So we've got the 2010 the Gypsy. So is GSM blend, 64% Grenache, 30% Syrah, and 6% Mourvèdre. So why don't you go ahead and introduce this wine and talk a little bit about it and why you chose this wine today, with its age.
So 2010 for us was a great vintage. It was a very show-off vintage. It was a year with loads and loads of sunshine. We had some weather before harvest, some cool weather, and we got great extract, hence beautiful deep color.
Sure.
Grenache from the vineyard planted in 1959. The most exceptional Grenache vineyard that I've had the joy and the pleasure to work with. And it's been an absolute kind of honor to work with this fruit all these years. And this vineyard planted in 59, planted on its own roots. It's not even grafted. So it stands on its own on a hillside, high about 400 meters above sea level, completely isolated, like a wild gypsy on a hill. Hence the thought of the name Gypsy for this wine.
Mm-hmm.
And the road up there is a dirt track, and it's a great track to take a rented car, a friend's 4x4. You wouldn't want to really take your own vehicle up there in the winter. I mean, you'd take somebody else's. It's that kind of, it's a really bad road.
Yeah,
bad
it's going to take a beating.
Yeah. We suffer two kind of levels of abuse. Right at the beginning of the season, all of the small antelope find that these fresh green shoots are the very first green shoots on the mountainside. So they just love coming in. So we've had to fence the vineyard from the antelope to keep them out of it. And then at the end of the season, when this fruit is sitting there, when all the berries are sitting there, the baboons look at this as the very last fruit on the mountain as we head into the fall and into the end of the season. So they just jump over the fence wholesale. I mean, they step over a fence. They don't have any respect for a fence. And they would literally come in. So we really have to guard these grapes for about a month before we get to harvest them. We go up, this is remote from where we are. It's about a 2.5-hour drive. It's on the Cape West Coast, if you can imagine, up on the foothills of the Cederberg Mountains in a place called Pikkenierskloof. Now there's a mouthful for you, but it's 2.5 hours northwest of Cape Town. It's 450 meters above sea level, and it produces the tiniest little Grenache fruit that we work with. These berries are the size of your little fingernail, and inside that berry, inside each berry, there are still 3 pips, 3 seeds. So you can imagine how little flesh there is in that berry. The concentration is vast. We pop them into a tank. We allow some carbonic maceration to begin with. We then have to get into the tank in that carbon dioxide. You've got to aerate the tank to make sure nobody has a bad accident. Breathing carbon dioxide is not good for you. Do not do this at home. All right? Do not do this at home.
It's like a nice zing. It's like if you've ever poured a can of like Pepsi or Coke too fast and you go to drink it and you smell it, it's like that little kind of sparkle zing right through your brain, and it's like,
yeah.
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 It's crazy.
Exactly. So we get some carbonic going, and then we destalk, and then we ferment this, but it's all wild yeast ferment, and then finally this goes into very old oak barrels for 2 years. We then look at the blend. Does it need some Syrah? Can we add a little Mourvèdre? Do we need to boost it? Do we need to give it a little bit of richness from the Mourvèdre? If you imagine an upside down pyramid, a pyramid on its point, that base, the big square top of the pyramid, is where I want all the Grenache, red fruit, strawberries, pomegranate to be. Below that, I want the spice of the Syrah. And then right at the point, I just need that boom that gives you that kind of bass tone that Mourvedre can add to the wine. You don't know what it does, it just goes boom.
Yeah, it has that almost like subtle earth tone, and like it just, where Grenache, it comes in almost linear, like it comes in fast and straight and precise. Syrah gives it a little bit more kind of body, but the Mourvedre, it kind of smooths everything out and gives it almost more, not quite volume, but depth, which I find pleasing. Another thing I'd like to add about this is the 2010, and it's under screw top, under stealth enclosure. Basically, it's a 10-year-old wine under a metallic closure. Some people would think, oh, you should have drank it, when it was 3 or 4 years old. It's drinking beautifully right now. It actually has all of like the high-toned, dark red fruit. That's you get that wild strawberry, that subtle pomegranate, but there's also the classic like powdered sugar that I get from Grenache, and it's still very lively. There's almost like a sweet tobacco leather component. I imagine it's from the Syrah and Mourvedre as they've kind of matured with time, but it's still a beautiful wine. It has a slight touch of Garnet, as you can kind of see, but it's a beautiful wine. Showing very well.
Thank you. I just love the preservation of that stealth enclosure. It truly preserves the fruit. And when people say to me, I'm surprised the wine ages under Stelvin, there is so much oxygen in the wine from your fermentation. There's so much oxygen already held in the wine, already absorbed into the wine. You don't have to worry. The aging will take place. Corks do not age wine. Corks are a variable factor that might cause wine to age. That's all they do. They're actually a closure, nothing more. And I love the Stelvin closure for its absolute reliability. And I can tell you that every bottle that we open is as consistent as this. They're brilliant, just brilliant. It really does make for great, great consumer reliability.
For sure. And granted, you'll still always have someone out there that says, I'm only going to drink wine that has cork. I will never really purchase or sell wines that have a stealth enclosure. Why do you do that? But it's in great shape right now. And one of the takeaways from my last trip to South Africa, I was tasting with Rudy from Telema, and he opened a Chardonnay that was more than 16 years old under stealth enclosure, and I was thinking, this is just going to be terrible, and it was really good. I was like, this actually kind of tastes almost like Chardonnay, like Chablis, where it was still slightly reductive, but it still had all of its vibrancy, and it still captured all of the essence and energy in the wine, which I was like, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but sure, I'll try it, whatever. And I tried it, and it's like, this seems
real key to working
work.
with Stelvin is understanding that you don't need very much sulfur.
Correct.
And if you make sure you don't have that sulfur, you can really make a difference by using low sulfur levels when you bottle. So we're looking at sulfur levels below 20 parts free sulfur when we bottle. We never bottle under Stelvin over 20 parts free sulfur. That's tiny. That's really low sulfur. I think that's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
Nobody loves sulfur a lot. I've never seen a mixologist say, you know what, I need to finish a drink, just a splash of sulfur on the top. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Right there with you. I've never seen that either. Awesome. Any last items that you would like to talk about the Gypsy before we move on to some Chenin?
I would say that this climate, where we are in Stellenbosch, we're particularly complex because we've 5 mountain ranges. If you think of Napa, those mountains all run parallel. Here we don't run parallel. These mountains all running at different angles to each other. So we create multiple different pockets of weather and terroir. And I think there are great pockets facing the ocean that work incredibly well with Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre. And I think you're going to see a lot more of these kind of Mediterranean style blends coming out of here. The other thing, and it's almost contrary, which works particularly well in Stellenbosch in terms of red grapes, is Cabernet. And that's on the other side of the slope. Literally, if you're planting Grenache on this side, you should plant Cabernet on that side. And it's a different world on that side of the slope. You have different sunshine, you have different aspect. And Cabernet, I mean, Stellenbosch is the heart of South Africa's Cabernet territory. So we're seeing really great complexity coming out of Stellenbosch. But I think that these kind of Rhone-style blends are certainly something that South Africa is going to get very good at.
For sure. Yeah, I concur about the other side of the mountain going into Stellenbosch for Cabernet country. You almost get this like orographic process that it just kind of hits, and then you have a completely different growing climate on the other side, which makes sense for something that can take a little bit more heat units and ripen like that.
Yeah.
So we're going to do the Old Vines next, 2018 Old Vine Chenin Blanc. Want to get your mirror out again?
Can we do that twice?
Right? Let's see. Let's see if we can make the magic happen twice. There it is. Awesome. Cool. So 2018.
You know, my wife's going to be looking for this in the morning. It's going to be a lot of trouble, but we're picking that up.
Awesome. So why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about your Old Vine Reserve Chenin.
So Old Vine Reserve was exactly where I started with Chenin Blanc in 1995. 94 was our first vintage on the property, and I was beguiled by the Sauvignon Blanc grapes because the fruit was so pretty, and I couldn't find that pretty in the Chenin Blanc grapes. So in 95, I went to look at Chenin Blanc, and I started to figure out what was happening in Chenin Blanc and what was different about it. And I thought, let's not settle for the obvious that you can see and taste in the Sauvignon. Let's go for what you can't see and taste in the Chenin and find out how to extract that. And I thought, what I'm going to need is to go and select two selections through the vineyard, pick all the fruit on the sunny side, on the western. For us, that'll be the kind of warmer, hot afternoon western sun. For you, it would be the eastern slopes in the northern hemisphere. So you get that kind of long afternoon sunshine. Pick every bunch that's been exposed to sunshine, where the berries are already slightly yellow. They've had some direct sunshine. They've got a little bit of sunburn. The skins are a little thicker on those berries. Let's pick all of that fruit, take that into stainless steel tank. Let's treat it respectfully, very cold. Let's really go through a cold fermentation, be very, very reductive with that. And then let's wait a while and go pick the berries that haven't seen any sunshine. Take those berries, let's press them, squeeze them, leave them in the press on the skins for a couple of hours, get some of the extract of the skins and the stalks, and then put that into barrels, into French 400-liter barrels, wild yeast ferment, and let's have a look at these two parts in 6, 7, 8, 9 months' time and see what they can do if we put them back together with the conservative fruit from the stainless steel and then the oxidative kind of fermentation wild yeast in barrel from the second part that was really fruit that had not seen any sunshine. So this was always a concept of trying to find two parts from the same vineyard and work with it differently and try and be complementary to each other, where you could put back the fruit and bring in, and the time in barrel for me is just the most important. That time in barrel is, the French have a word that we can't even translate directly into English. The French talk about élevage. And that élevage is like bring up, raise up, educate, teach. It's all sorts, but we haven't got one word for it. So the idea was to be able to use that time in barrel to educate the wine, keep the wine absolutely pristine in tank with the fruit, and then put these two parts together. Look at that golden hue that we've got on that. Sure. I just love the kind of depth of color on the wine. I think that depth of color.
It has, when you smell it, you get the freshness, but when you taste it, you get texture, you get volume, and you also get that slight kind of nuttiness. So you actually have like the best of both worlds. It makes me think of a parent. If you have two children, you cannot raise them the same, you can't love them the same. each child is going to need something a little different. And
Yeah.
a good parent will cater to what the child's needs are so they can be the best human being that they can be as an adult. And that's what this wine reminds me of, is you can see the freshness, the vibrancy from the stainless steel, but you can also see the weight, the texture, and the nuttiness from the oxidative kind of open vat or oak aging essence from it. So you have the best of both worlds coming together to create something that's ultimately better than both of its parts individually.
Yeah, I'm pleased you love that, because for me, when you talk about texture, I think texture is so critically important in wine, and we don't often talk about texture. We you know, even in food we might talk about texture, but I'd go so far as to say to you that any food that you truly love or don't love might not be about the flavor. It's probably more about the texture. And I think the texture in wine is critically important. And when you look at a wine like this and you look at where we are, or where you are in the Northern Hemisphere now going into fall, you really want, if you're going to have a white wine, you want something with texture at this time of the year. I think that this is just the perfect wine for fall, as you're looking at some kind of seafood, some New England clam chowders, if you're looking at kind of something with a little bit of seafood or scallops or shrimp, or these wines are just delicious because you've got enough texture to stand up to all that rich flavor.
For sure. I can also see this with some leafy greens that are slightly bitter as well, that have a little more kind of bite to them. This would be able to stand up to that as well. It's a very, very food-friendly wine. Yeah, it's great.
Very food-friendly. We still have, what we did is we release when we have a great vintage, what I consider one of my great vintages, one of my really favorite vintages, I'll hold back a small amount, maybe a pallet, like 50 cases. 56 cases. We'll break that out 10 years later. We just launched our 2007 here on the vineyard, so that people who come all the way to the vineyard get an opportunity to taste something really special and very limited. I mean, the 2007 is not available commercially, but it's right here on the vineyard, and it is the most delicious wine. And texture there, you're looking at texture full blown. This has now got this kind of burnished, kind of, it ends up having the kind of that you get on an old piece of brass, that kind of wonderful, wonderful texture that just settles into it. And the wine is delicious. There's still fruit on it. There's still fruit, but you've got a 13-year-old Chenin Blanc. Who would think white wine could possibly last that long? But Chenin Blanc does that. Ordinarily, Chenin Blanc will go 20, 30 years. So I've got no qualms about how long this wine's going to last. The 2007s really are delicious.
Awesome. Cool. Anything else you would like to say about the 2018 Old Vine Reserve Chenin Blanc?
Well, 18 is only just settled into its stride. We're literally, the French will even have a word for it. They'll tell you that after they bottle Chenin, this wine's been in barrel for about 9-10 months. By the time we get it into bottle, we've made up that blend with the barrel and the tank. And it's never just 50-50 mix and stir. It's always how much can we put together. And there's always a kind of understanding of where that balance, where the tipping point is. And then we put that together, and the wine then goes to sleep. Just when you want it to be your prettiest, greatest creation, it's that cat thing all over again. You're kind of calling kitty kitty and it's going, yeah, see you later. And it goes to sleep. So the 2018 has only just begun to wake up. This wine has really begun its drinking window literally in the last 2-3 months. So this wine is at its, I think, delicious drinking right now, and set for the next 10 years happily.
Absolutely. I'm just trying to think of like what I'm gonna have with it for dinner tonight. Cool.
I would go with the prawn gumbo, depending where you are. You could, Chenin Blanc loves spice. You could put some hot peppers, some chilies with Chenin Blanc. Chenin is a non-combatant grape. That's this crazy cat thing all over again. Yeah. And you have some hot chili pepper on your tongue. You get some jalapeno or some hot flavor on your palate, and you have Sauvignon Blanc. You're going to have the Third World War taking place right in your palate. That's going to explode. Yeah. Chenin Blanc, no. Chenin Blanc kind of goes in soft, and restores your palate, gets you back to where you want to be, and it's gentle and brings out all the fruit in the wine. The heat of the kind of peppers and chilies really pulls the fruit out of Chenin. They work wonderfully together. I love that combination.
Yeah. I recently had a curry vindaloo with the Chenin, and it worked beautifully. Really, really tasty stuff. Yeah. Awesome. So let's go on to the last and final wine we're gonna try, the 2018 FMC. It's got the mirror again.
The FMC. Gotcha.
Awesome. So go ahead and introduce this wine and talk a little bit about it.
And this was just one crazy project, born maybe of more of passion and not truly understanding your place in society, I guess. But I said to the guy who taught me all I knew about winemaking, remember, I was never formally trained in winemaking. I was a hotelier, restaurateur, chef, and I came into winemaking. And it's not that far from cooking. It's about great ingredients, and then it's about preserving those ingredients and producing the best you can from those ingredients. So yeah, there are a lot of similarities. But at the same time, I was mentored by one of the greatest, a guy, South African, of German extract called Martin Mueller. And Martin taught me all that I know about winemaking. And he had simply 3 tenets. That's balance, balance, balance. That's all there was to it. It's very simple. He would tell me all the time, you don't understand balance. Yeah, of course I don't. Yeah. But that was another discussion. But I said to him, I want to make the best white wine in the world. And he's like, oh my God, this is going to be so difficult to work with this guy. He said, what makes you think you can make the best white wine? I said, what makes you think we shouldn't make the best white wine? What is the time restriction? Do we need to be here 10 years, 20 years, 15 years? Do I need to give my kids to make? What is the statute of limitations on making the best wine in the world? And he was like, oh. So 1997, we started. 98, we made 97, we made a wine. 98, we made a wine. 99, we made a wine. We really did everything we could. Special barrels, toasted the heads, put different heads onto the barrels. I mean, we did everything you could possibly imagine, except climbing into that bunghole. We stirred them, we rolled them, we turned them upside down. We used wild yeast, we used imported yeast, we did, you name it, everything. And eventually by 2000, we did nothing. We did the cat call. We called it and left it. And right. The 2000 vintage just suddenly shone. And it was brilliant. We took it to London, and an English journalist by the name of Matthew Jukes claimed it was the best white wine he tasted at the London Wine Trade Fair that year. So we figured we were onto something. And the vineyard, named for myself, Forrester and Martin Mueller, the Forrester Mueller Chenin, is a vineyard planted in 1970. They bush vines, head pruned, and here we get a small yield of about 3 tons per hectare. You're looking at 18 hectoliters in French terminology, 18 hectoliters per hectare, tiny yields. We picked the vineyard 5 times, and then we got hit by the drought cycle. We had 4 years of drought. So we started picking that vineyard 9, 10, 11 times, where we fly over the vineyard, we take a photograph. We use old American spy plane technology, where we put this photograph through an infrared screen called NDVI, Normalized Density Vegetative Index, something that Mondavi perfected about 30 years ago with Phil Freeze. And we took this program and started looking at the vineyard. It creates for us a digital leaf count. Imagine you had some idea of how dense your leaf is in various parts of your vineyard. So when you walk through the vineyard and you taste the fruit and you interrogate your GPS that tells you where you are, and you say to the photograph, where else does this sort of fruit happen? And it says you've got some here and some there and some there. And you then go mark that out, and you go pick that fruit the next day only in those zones, because the leaf is the original solar panel. It's the original converter that takes sunshine and takes that synthesis of sunshine and turns it into energy that creates all the complex carbohydrates They're going to be your sucrose, all your glucose, all of those OSEs that end up in ripeness in your fruit. And so the more leaf you have, the more work your plant can do, the less leaf you have. So you don't want to pick the whole vineyard at once, because you end up with average, and nobody gets out of bed to be average.
Yeah, it's very smart. Yeah, from the color, you can clearly see it's a touch darker, and it has a little bit more of a oak profile. It's lusher. It has a bit more viscosity, and it's fresh, and it hits the palate, and it almost coats, almost like milk, where it goes in and it hits all the palate, and it goes wide and deep, and then you're left with like this brilliant, soft, almost like cashew butter in the back. It's nice nuttiness that's very complex, but it still has good acidity. It's a very, very pleasing wine.
Thank you. And you know, for me, it is that literally that milk that you talk about is almost like a coconut milk coating, and then got almond. You get this kind of this milky almond cream texture, and then you get that apple, that baked apple. If somebody's baking an apple and you open an oven, you get that caramelized baked apple kind of coming out at you, and then that finish where you would expect Chardonnay always to be lime. This has got rosé, red ruby grapefruit. It's got that ruby grape, sweet sour finish on the end, and that to me is always the telltale note for good Chenin, for great Chenin. We've had the best time with this FMC. We've really put this through some huge tests, and it's been for us a real winner, and it earns us a lot of friends.
For sure. I think if you were to put this in a lineup of Burgundies, I think it would really confuse people, but I think they'd be like, wow, this is really good, but it's different. Like, and then they'd be looking at like, well, you get like the oak, you get like the apple, you get like these kind of nutty things going on. It's still weighty. It still has texture. What is? And then it would rack someone's brain, but they would still find great pleasure in drinking it.
One of my very best clients has a holiday home in the US, and I get a call from him once a year. And in like October, he's saying, I need to set up our wine for Thanksgiving, and you won't mind that if I take 5 cases of your FMC. That's my kind of everyday Romanée. That's my everyday kind of white Burgundy. If you don't mind, yeah, sure, it's $60 a bottle. You can have that every day. But I mean, you go to Burgundy, it's going to cost you probably 2 or 3 times that.
Oh, for sure.
And if you think of Montrachet, he says this is like everyday Montrachet. I'm like, I'll take that. That's fine. And I'm like, okay, fine, okay.
Right.
Anything you want, anything if that's what you fancy.
Right.
So yeah. So I mean, we've had a lot of fun with this wine. It really has seen its way onto a lot of very good wine lists and very good homes. It's just been a lot of fun going out with FMC.
For sure. Awesome. Any last words you'd like to say about the FMC before we move on? I know we have limited time today, and Instagram Live likes to kick us off about an hour into it, and we've got about 7 minutes before that happens. So,
and yeah, I think I'd just like to say thank you to you for your interest, and thank you, to Chenin Blanc for giving me this wonderful canvas to work with. I mean, Chenin Blanc, when I started with Chenin Blanc, South Africa 25 years ago, it was truly a very unheard of grape. I mean, Bernard Germain, who I worked with in the Loire Valley, wanted to put Chenin Blanc on his label, and he was told in no uncertain terms by the AOC that if he put Chenin Blanc on the label, they would declassify him. He could not say Chenin Blanc. He was from Savigny. He was not Chenin Blanc. That is impossible to imagine. And he was desperate to try and explain to people about this grape. And I took up this kind of thing. And when I look at my friends' children and our children and the kind of next generation of winemakers in South Africa, and in fact around the world, Chenin Blanc has a huge revival happening. There's a lot of Chenin Blanc happening out of New Zealand, out of Canada, out of Clarksburg. I mean, you're seeing Chenin Blanc coming back out of the US again now. You're seeing a lot of people making Chenin Blanc. And the kids here in South Africa are kind of the assumption that Chenin Blanc's what we should be making. Oh yeah, everybody makes Chenin Blanc. Sure, that's just the obvious choice. It wasn't 25 years ago. It was the most least obvious choice. It really wasn't what anybody was going to go to make. So to have seen the wheel turn in my short kind of experience in the wine industry in 25 years has been a real blessing and a wonderful thing to watch. And I think we're set up for some new heights. South Africa owns 2/3 of all the Chenin Blanc in the world. Correct. Twice as much planted in South Africa as in the Loire Valley in France. We have approximately 18,000 hectares of Chenin Blanc, and I would expect that you're going to see some great, great wines coming out of here.
I see them already. They're already here, and that's one thing that I was going to drive home as well. Is people think of Chenin, and most people gravitate towards the Loire in France, and don't realize that South Africa is home to the largest planting of Chenin Blanc on the planet. And when you have wine like this, showing as it does, as food friendly as it is, it's a no-brainer. You can see its sincerity, its intention, its precision, and they're stunning. So well done. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know that you're a very busy man, and give your pups a little pet on the head for me. And I look forward to connecting with you in person once the world is back to some kind of normalcy and I can get on a plane and come see you guys. So
yes, sir. Come and see us. It'd be wonderful. Look forward to it, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody who signed up.
For sure. Until then, keep it locked here till next week. Next Wednesday, I have Johan Reinicke. Till then, stay safe, drink well, and be kind to others.
Thank you, sir.
Cheers, Ken.